You're listening to the School of Healing and Magical Arts podcast, a podcast on our interconnection with the animistic world and cyclical embodiment.
You are listening to Evonne Wildheart and Natasha Colchester, and we are both very grateful for your presence. Hello, and a very warm welcome to our first podcast for the School of Healing and Magical Arts. I'm Natasha.
And I am Evonne, and you are listening. This is our very first episode on Omens, oracles, and Obvi-ism, listening to the call to action. But before we get into all of that and introduce ourselves and the podcast, we're going to light a candle of intention and holding. So I invite you to maybe close your eyes, to tune in to yourself. Take a deep breath and take this moment to just deeply listen. Listen to yourself, listening to the world around you, and just tuning into your breath. And I light this candle and I call in this deep reverence of the world, of ourselves, and that of other. I call in our allies, our guides, and that of our well and healed ancestors. The guides that work in the other realms beyond us. As we tune into this space, this place, right now, here and now, open and fully present, feeling connected, centered, and ready. And so it is.
And so it is. And here we are.
And here we are. So to introduce ourselves, my name is Evonne Wildheart. I am a mother of four. I'm a teacher. I'm a teacher at the School of Shamanic Womancraft. Also teacher and creator of the Invoking Inanna Journey and Temple of New Wheat, which is an astrology study group.
And I am an intern teacher with the School of Shamanic Womancraft with Evonne. I am a kinesiologist, a past life regression therapist, an energy healer, which sort of encapsulates a bunch of things. I run women's circles and I do drum making, shamanic drum making with Evonne also. And yeah, I think that's all I need to say about who I am. And I also want to mention that I am a woman in my perimenopausal time of life. So journeying towards menopause, which seems for some reason important to mention today.
And we're both coming to you from Victoria, Australia. I'm from Dja Dja Wurrung Country in Central Highlands Victoria.
I'm from Wurrung Country. I have a problem, I have to admit, with wanting to say I'm from Dja Dja Wurrung Country. So that just was that little mental glitch. So I am currently living on Wurrung Country in Victoria.
And here we are. We've been planning, we've been sitting in this and incubating this project for quite some time now. So this is very exciting that we come to you at this precipice of what is happening in our world at this point in time. So we just want to give you a warm welcome and thank you for tuning in to this very first episode of our podcast.
And we just want to say, that part of this topic or this exact podcast is listening to the call to action. And that is exactly what we have done. We have had this call to action tapping on our shoulder, whispering in our ear for a little while. And so finally, here we are. And so we're really excited to be here. And thanks to everyone who listens and watches this podcast. We appreciate you. And I also want to say that, it's really important to mention that we are not experts. Neither of us are experts in anything, actually. And one thing that one of our dear teachers, Jane Hardwick Collins, has taught us is that everyone is always a teacher and a student. And, if you get to a point in your life where you think you've figured it all out, well, that's probably means you've got a lot more to learn. Because that's how I felt when I was in my 20s. And now as an older woman, I know that there's far more for me to learn than there is that I know.
And to know this information, take it or leave it. Some may resonate and some may not, and that's totally okay. If there's tools that we speak about that help you in your transformational journey, as we all are in this transformational journey, as is the earth and the whole cosmos, actually, amazing. If not, that's okay. And we come here as all sovereign beings in our hearts and a real deep place of love and passion for this work that has brought us to here, the work of of women-centered focus work, but also the realms of shamanism and animism and connection to everything around us.
The all or nothing.
The all or nothing.
If
All or
there is
nothing.
anything that the all or nothing, and if there is anything that we ever say that doesn't quite resonate, feel free to let it go like leaves in the wind. This one thing we really want to advocate for is self-listening, listening to yourself and knowing what your truth is and what is true for you. And, as a kinesiologist, that has been one of the biggest learnings being a kinesiologist, that, as a practicing kinesiologist, I'm not the one with the answers. We're actually tuning into your body and your knowing and your wisdom. And there's so much that you already know that you just need to remember. So a lot of what we talk about will actually be possibly stuff you already know, because you've already lived that in some way or known that in your bones from your ancestors. There's many ways of knowing, and it's really a remembering, which is exactly what we're doing. We're just remembering a lot of old wisdom, not inventing anything new here at all. And this podcast, the intention of our podcast is intentionally to really share the wisdom and insights that we're busy uncovering along our way. And that is things that we're learning from our teachers. And there's many teachers, so we will probably mention them. They'll come up as we go along. But as I've already mentioned, for both of us, an important teacher was Jane Hardwick Collins, who created the School of Shamanic Womancraft, and her teachers, Jean Pavati Baker and James Brown Bear and Cedar Barstow. And I'm probably not even mentioning all of them.
Maggie Thompson. Yeah.
Sorry?
Maggie Thompson.
Maggie Thompson. Thank you. I knew there was one more there. And also from our lived experiences. And so one of the biggest ways that or most significant ways that we as human beings learn is through difficulty, actually, through challenge. And, learning how we meet that challenge and how we grow from that challenge. And anything you wanted to say about that, Evonne?
Yeah, and our life experiences, and and listening to all our teachers, whether it be the tree or the weather or the the guy in the supermarket that you run into, or there's this. Everybody's a teacher and everybody's a student in this realm. And I guess for us in this podcast, we want to invite you to have an open heart and an open mind, and to realize that we all don't have all the wisdom and knowledge, that we are all sitting here as students and we are all teachers in this realm. So if you're listening to this podcast and for the episodes to come, and there's something that you've got wisdom on, that, share it, please. We really want this to be a really deep space for connection and community and sharing the wisdom that we all have within ourselves, and, to see what we see in each other. So that real space of connection. I think this is really much, part of what we are wanting to bring in these podcasts, is deep connection from all the things, but also with each other, and to know that we are all here learning as we go.
We are all here learning, and part of that learning comes from listening. And listening to the bigger picture, the inner realm, and also the outer realm. And so we will, as we go along at certain times, be talking about different maps, the cycles of the weather and the moon and the sun that show us certain things and take us to certain spaces, and the cosmos. And as Evonne fleetingly mentioned, she is an astrologer. And so we will definitely speak to that on our travels, because I've got to say, knowing that map makes everything just a little bit easier to understand. knowing that we are part of this bigger picture. We're not on our own. In fact, it's hilarious because, you're never on your own. You're always with other, whether it's seen or unseen, human or more than human, on this planet or around this planet. Sometimes it's good to give yourself a moment to recognize, we're on this planet and it's moving, and it's moving around on its own orbit, and it's moving around in space along with everything else that's moving around. So giving yourself that sort of global perspective can be really helpful sometimes, and sometimes it's all about watching what's right in front of you or what's happening inside of you. So we will speak to that a lot, and especially in this episode, because that's part of our topic, listening to the call to action. How do you do that? And so one thing I want to say, sort of put to you all, is how did you end up here listening to us, tuning into this podcast? There would have been something that showed up, a little omen or oracle or signpost, if you like, and then there would have been an answering call within you that sort of told you that's a yes for me.
So in this podcast, throughout all the episodes, we're going to be sharing with you tools that we've learnt, strategies. We're going to have special guests that come in. We're going to speak to all sorts of manner of things that brings, this theme of healing and magical arts into real life. So, shall we start?
I think we should. And I just, before we go on, while we're still talking about our intention, I just want to mention that we are in service, and we are in service to providing, I guess we'll call this a vehicle to inspire, um, each other, actually, to keep us inspired, and also our community. And right now you're listening, so you are part of that community. So
Welcome.
welcome.
And we also come to you as priestesses of transformation. So, holding this space for both ourselves and all things, actually, for yourself, for the planet, for everything, as we all journey through this deep transformational process that is unfolding this ascension, into this a better world. And what do we need to do, and how do we move through that to come to a place of peace and harmony with ourselves, each other, and more than other?
That's why
So
we
that's why we're here. So begin with, I think we should introduce our allies. We have two allies at this point in time for this podcast. Our first ally we'll speak to is Dragonfly. So Dragonfly is actually the animal ally for our podcast. And we're going to be talking about animal allies later on in further episodes. But we just want to introduce what is the energy, I guess, that's coming up with our animal ally, which is Dragonfly. So Dragonfly is all about breaking down illusions. It's about the metamorphosis process. It's about moving from one state to completely transforming into a different state, and really like shining this brilliant light. And if you think of how dragonflies move, they're quite directive in their movement. They move here and move there with quite ease and grace through the beautiful sunlight. So they have the different elements of water and air, but also there's a fire element that comes with the sun, and how they, move around in this space. So welcome, Dragonfly.
welcome, Dragonfly. Just thinking about their beautiful wings. If you've ever seen a dragonfly's wings in the sun, they are luminescent.
Luminescence.
And so when you speak of the fire element aspect, that's what I think of their like luminescent wings that are so beautiful. So along with Dragonfly, our mineral ally is clear quartz. So I have a clear quartz here, fairly self-explanatory because it's clear. And so just a little bit about clear quartz. It comes in many forms, and most well known for its natural points. And in fact, the amazing thing about clear quartz, which is why it's been used in tech actually in the past, I don't know exactly how it's used now, but it was one of the main uses is to transfer energy. So when you squeeze a natural point, so not one that's been carved by a human, but a natural point like this one, if you squeeze it, actual electrons come out of the point. So it is a conductor of energy. And so it's a really powerful tool, and it's obviously brings clarity, and it is an amplifier. So when you have yourself a clear quartz and you spend a lot of time with it, you can really hone its use for a particular purpose, so and best if you've really made friends with it. It's something you work with a lot and you keep close and you keep it cleansed and you look after it. It can be a real amplifier of your intentions, whether it's for healing work, manifesting. I'm even holding on to this one while I'm talking, so it's got a little purpose today. So yeah, if crystals call to you, I really encourage you to choose yourself a clear quartz and start working with a clear quartz, and be prepared to be surprised and delighted at how you can use a clear quartz. And the cool thing is they are extremely common on this planet. There's so much quartz. In fact, the crust of the earth is about 12% quartz.
Mm.
So there's a lot of clear quartz around. So find yourself a piece of clear quartz and start working with it, and see what's possible for yourself, and trusting yourself to work with it in your own way.
Mm.
There's
So
lots. I'm going to talk more about crystals later, but I just wanted to introduce clear quartz as a master healer, master crystal, because it can be used for anything. Actually, it doesn't. It's clear, like a clear starting point.
So these are the allies that are supporting us, and there are there's many, many more that are holding us here today. But just to really give you a baseline on from where we are coming from. So another important thing to introduce in whether it's any inner circle or anything that you're birthing, which is what we are doing today, birthing our very first episode of this podcast, is what is happening right here, right now, both on the Earth cycle, but in the astro cycle as well, just so you can get the energy of what is the baseline, as Jane Hardwick Collins would say. Anything that's happening at the very beginning of a cycle sets the tone for the rest of the cycle. So it is very useful to know what is happening at the very beginning of anything that you are birthing, whether it be a baby, whether it be podcasts, whether it be a book that you're writing, any creative projects.
And that could be a garden that you're designing. It could be redecorating or rearranging the home, or starting anything,
Start of
actually.
the day,
Out of the day, how you start sets the
sets the
tone.
tone.
A good thing to remember whenever you're starting something is take a moment to really be with that, rather than, we have a tendency in our modern life to just rush from one thing to the next, but then you're never really anywhere and you're not really setting any tone other than maybe the rush.
So it's good to know birth stories, whether it's your own personal birth story or that of your children, or whatever, whether it will be your workplace or your home, for example. Just to know your birth story, it can really help and support you a lot in terms of how, what's happening in this present moment. So to begin, we're going to introduce some of the maps of our birth story for this podcast on the healing and magical arts. Tash, do you want to talk about the Earth map at the beginning?
Yes, so we're starting in the earthly realm. So it is the 28th of May right now, and we are actually between two seasonal Sabbats. One is Samhain. So a lot of us are familiar with Samhain being called Halloween or Day of the Dead, or All Hallows, I think, is another one. There's a few names for it around the globe. And traditionally, this happens as we enter winter. So it is when the veils are thin between the worlds, because we are going into the dark. Similar to the time of day of dusk, going into the dark. It's not dark yet, but everything looks different all of a sudden. If you've ever been out in nature as that time frame comes through, everything just looks different. Things that were once shadow now look like they have form. Depth perception changes, all this stuff happens. And so it is the same at this time of the year. However, in the Northern Hemisphere, it happens at the end of October. So you might notice that in Australia, if that's where you are, we are in the Southern Hemisphere here, that is still commercially celebrated in October. But in Australia and in the Southern Hemisphere, that is the time of spring, which is obviously the absolute opposite energy because it's all about growth and the light increasing and energy increasing. So we're sitting at the opposite of that here in the Southern Hemisphere, and we're going now deep into the dark. And in fact, soon, we're heading towards at the 21st of June, it will be winter solstice, which is an astrological point of the darkest night. So, which is like the shortest day and the longest night. It's the point of the most dark in our lived experience on this planet when we're in the Southern Hemisphere. And from then on, the light will begin very slowly to increase. And so this portal we're now is literally the dark, dark, dark part of the year. You might have noticed that, like it's getting dark really quick. I think it's about 5, it starts feeling like at about 5 o'clock it starts happening. And, whereas in summer, it's like 9:30, it's still light. And so we're in that portal. So we're in almost like a void portal of coming from that harvest season of autumn, collecting all of our harvests, like squirrels collecting nuts, like animals collecting things for the winter. And we're going into the dark. So that's where we're beginning this cycle in the earthly realm, in the portal of the void, heading into the winter.
The deep riches that are in the void, the
Mm.
realm of the dark goddess.
Yes, and the realm of dreaming. So here we are
Mm.
dreaming this in, like the winter is a dream time, because we want to sleep more, we want to be inside more, we're getting cozy, we're going in, because it's cold and it's dark. And so that's what's drawing in. So thinking about that, it's like this, yeah, what are you dreaming in? What are your dreams and dreams for the next turn of the wheel?
And I think also in this winter solstice portal that we're sort of in here, this in the southern hemisphere, this exposure to the cosmos. Like you go outside, and it's at the moment we're just past a new moon. So there is no other light in the sky, and you have this exposure to this rich, deep cosmic energy that comes through because it's more day dark hours and daylight hours. So there's something here about exposure to not just the void within but also out in the cosmic and allowing that information to transfer and to move through it. It's like what Tash said, that there's dreaming just feels like that there's more access to that
Yeah, and
information that's coming through.
makes me think of the cosmos within being reflected by the cosmos without. It sounds weird to say that, but within and without. And so maybe there's, I just want to actually say like a little invitation for everyone listening whilst we're in this dark phase of the year, and we're getting more of this darkness, to actually to go outside and spend some time at night in the dark looking up, and just letting yourself take that in as well and be a reflection, of what do you see, feel, and sense as you look upward and feel inward. Mm.
Yeah, and also maybe look at your relationship with the dark. I know that, our patriarchal culture has demonized anything that's dark. And, because, as Jane Hardwick Collins would say, another Jane quote, is like whatever the patriarchal is demonized holds power. And so, what is this space of the void, this space of all and nothingness? What is your relationship to the darkness? Especially as women, I think it's a scary place, especially if you're in a city or places like that and you're walking around in the dark. That can be quite a scary place. So how can we improve our relationship to this space of the darkness, of the void, and find comfort in that, because it has been so drilled into our psyches that the dark is a dangerous place.
And I just want to say on that topic of there's many stories that we've been told and we tell
Mm,
ourselves. And so one of those stories is that the dark is scary.
mm.
But if you think about it, nearly all life starts in the dark, and including us. We all began our time here on earth in the dark. And we spent, hopefully, if we were lucky, 9 months in the dark. And it was possibly a very safe and nurturing and nourishing space, So we all come
Mm.
from the dark. Plants, the seeds, the same, all grow in the soil in the dark.
Mm.
So, this is where life begins.
Mm.
This is where life begins in the dark.
Mm. And if that wasn't a safe space for you in the womb, what is here? What is it showing you of what needs to happen next to bring healing to that space and that compassion for yourself and possibly your mother womb space, and what needs to happen there if that's being called to your attention as well to bring us all, because we know that what's above is below, is within is without. And so when we're working on ourselves to heal, we also do that for each other. So what is it that needs to be attended to here in these spaces of the dark and the void space? Because they're very powerful when we can come into right and good relationship with the dark and the void.
Yeah. And again, coming back to that birth story and knowing,
Mm,
what was your beginning here?
mm,
And how has that imprinted on you? So then we've circled back to that again, Yvonne, and just wanted to underline and highlight that, like that it is really important to know that information. If you have people you can talk to who are still alive, who are around then that can give you that information, yeah, I definitely encourage you to get that information. And this is not about making any mothers or fathers wrong. We're not blaming anybody, because I also trust that the journey that you chose to have is the perfect journey for you. You're becoming into your wholeness, and so possibly whatever happened at birth was setting the tone for that, so that you could have the journey that you need to have. And we like to look at everything that way, of like, it's not a negative thing, it's not a bad thing, it is what it is. What can you make of it?
mm,
How can you harness the power from it? Because as we said, a lot of the times those challenges really give us a chance to step up and work out who we are and what our strengths
mm.
are, and how resilient we can be, or how loving we can be, or you know all of that sort of stuff. So yeah.
And be possibly the healers and the teachers of
Mm.
the wounding of that, classic Chiron, which I'm sure we'll go into in another episode. So we're just really introducing what we're really about, and just setting a tone for future episodes. So again, as we said earlier, if none of this is resonating, that's fine. Picking up what you can. If not, that's totally fine. So yes,
And
know your
also,
birth story is really important.
your birth story is important. And also, just before everyone talks about the cosmic map,
Hmm.
I just want to mention, if you do have any questions, something we've said that's triggered something, or if a question pops up or something, please share it below,
Hmm. In the comments.
and do our best to respond.
Oh, it's exciting.
It's
Okay.
exciting. That's how we're going to learn as well.
Yes.
That whole teacher student thing is like, undoubtedly we are hoping that we will also learn and gain more insights from what you bring
Hmm.
to this space.
I just want to quickly jump back into the Earth realm cycle, which we are traversing at the moment, going into winter solstice here in the Southern Hemisphere, and ways that you can honor this part of the cycle. Natasha's already spoken about going outside, being, if you can, feeling what it feels like to be in the dark outside. But there's so many different ways that we can honor this point of the wheel of that death and rebirth. Like, really, this is winter solstice marks the death of the year that's been, and it's the birth of a new solar cycle to come. So it's a very significant point. So really, at this point in the wheel, we're letting, really in this deep letting go process, and starting to dream in and to call in what we want to see for the next 12 months. And the ways that you can do that is simply set up like a simple, like an altar or a place where you can, you might want to have a candle there that you light every time you want to make a wish or a dream, or you might have a piece of paper there that you can write down and put in a fire every time you want to let go of something. Things associated with winter solstice, you think of the dark, so you might want to have a dark blue navy cloth to represent the sky, or you might have, you know, little symbols of stars or icicle. I don't know, snow or anything that represents this turning of the wheel. Olives are usually harvest this time of year, so maybe put a jar of olives to remember that this deep harvest. So there's so many ways, but I feel altars are a really good place to remember, to help your mind remember this sense of sacredness that you can bring into your home. You might want to, if you've got kids, to, bring in things from outside that represent this time. And, there's so many ways that you can help honor and bring in this work into your own home to help you remember the sacredness of life. Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah, and it's just, thinking about that altar, it doesn't have to be anything fancy,
Mm,
like I'm sure maybe you're thinking in your mind, oh, like those big fancy altars. It can be the simplest,
mm,
tiniest thing. It might be just a small little space where you've just got a candle, or you might have a bigger space and you might include things. I love the idea of collecting things from your environment, like what's in the garden or what's in the
mm,
neighborhood at this time of year. Like, is it seed pods that are empty now? Is it, what is it? Because that's what you find out there is what's happening.
mm,
Or it might be something like from your ancestral lineage, so thinking about olives, that makes me think of,
mm,
European lineages. You might have something else that happens in from one of your lineages, that you might want to include. And it's such a beautiful thing to have something to, as a little focal point. So I love that you've brought that in,
mm,
Yvonne.
mm,
And
mm.
I'm sure we'll talk more about altars as we go along, because we just love a good altar.
Love a good altar.
Because, in our modern life, with all the things that are happening with all the technology and the phones and the things and the this and the that and rushing around, it's really easy, in our homes with the light and the heating and the air conditioning and all the things, to actually not even realize
Mm,
what's going on.
mm,
So it's a kind of anchoring in of like, this is really what's happening in the world that
mm.
we live in.
Yeah, and it helps us to remember that, there's something far greater at play here. There's the unseen realm, and also the seen realm of just being outside, but there's something far greater than us that is happening here at this time. And we can get so caught into our daily lives and, work and kids and, and it's quite easy to just be set adrift into the world of busy, and forget where we're actually at, where's our center point. And having things like altars, seasonal altars, in a place that you can see it, just helps our brains, to remember that, oh, we're part of something far greater than us. And maybe the spilt milk is not, when we come back to that something far greater than us, maybe it's not that such a big deal. Um,
Or the internet goes down.
yeah, things like that.
Something like that, yes.
So, okay. So, another map that we like to bring in, is the cosmic map, the astro map. So, we're just going to show the map. So, we're recording this on the 28th of May, Wednesday, Wednesday, the 28th of May, 2025. And we started recording this at 1 p.m. And so I've put Melbourne, Australia, as our chart place, which is, we're in our time zone. And here we have it. We are just on the new moon. I'm just going to get my little pen. So here we are. This is the eastern horizon. So this is when we look out to the east. This is where we are looking at, this part of the wheel. This is the western horizon where we'll see the sunset later on. So right about now, if we were to look out in the sky, we would see the sun, and you won't see the moon because it's hidden between the beams of the sun, but the sun and the moon. So you can see that the moon is on the just below the sun. So it means that the just in the last 48 hours, the moon has passed over the path of the sun and it's now in a new lunar cycle. So we are starting this on a Gemini lunar cycle. And Gemini is all about communication and it's all about a movement of words and also siblings and our real first relationship that's outside of our parents, which is usually siblings. It's also related to neighbors as well, those who are close proximity to us. But it's really that, it's mutable air. So it's like how we move our words. It really is a place of, what are we speaking, trusting what we are saying, trusting what we are hearing. Can we bring this into our new moon sort of prayers in terms of how we speak and think and move our words and language around. And being a new moon, that again, coming back, this is a new lunar cycle. This is a birth point of this next 4 weeks. That's what a new moon is. And so there's an invitation here is to maybe take some time to make a new moon prayer. What do you want to see happen in the next 4 weeks? Simple the better. And, plant these seeds for the next 4 weeks. Do it now, and then by the full moon, which will be in a couple of weeks' time, that'll be a full illumination of whatever we planted here. So if you think of seeds in the garden, this is the point, the metaphoric seeds for the next 4 weeks that we are planting. It's really interesting because we're also, this lunar cycle will go past winter solstice, so it feels like this doubling up of that winter solstice seed planting metaphoric seeds, as well as a lunar cycle. So there's cycles upon cycles upon cycles, and we're going to keep unpacking this as we go in our podcast. But just wanting to introduce this, that we are beginning this podcast on this last new moon of this Earth cycle. And whatever is happening now will set the tone for the next 4 weeks. But because of the winter solstice element, the Earth map as well, it is also really for the next 12 months. So it's a very potent new moon. Also, just want to quickly say that this is Mercury. Mercury is the ruler. So each sign has a planet ruler as a part of the energy that it holds. And Mercury, as we know, Mercury is the messenger, it's communicator. Mercury also, which is interesting, which is very related to this time of year, helps the souls go to the underworld to be transformed and rebirthed, and brings them back up. So there's an energy here of that death and rebirth portal, which is that winter solstice energy of going into the dark and letting go what no longer serves, and trusting that a new cycle will begin, because it's cyclical. There is no ending. It just keeps going around and around like a spiral dynamics. And so this new moon, it's Gemini new moon. Call in an intention. What do you want to see happen for the next 4 weeks? But also, start thinking of the seeds you want to plant. What do you want to see happen for the next 12 months too? So it's a very potent new moon, because you've got Mercury there, but also the energy here. You've got Jupiter, which is the planet of expansion as well, and the teacher, the guide, the storyteller in Gemini here in its final degrees of Gemini as well. So there's a lot of Gemini energy. So if you want to know more about this, come to the Temple of New Eat Patreon and you can join a membership there. But this is just the basics of what's happening. But it's very potent, very communication filled, words as spells type energy, which is what we begin our episode 1 of this podcast.
Thank you, Evonne. And I just want to say on the topic of that, words are spells. So Evonne just dropped that in there, words are spells. And I'm going to just pick it up because it's one of our favorite things to talk about and to remember, because, I know that, how creative your thoughts are. So how you think, and so this is, I've learned as a practitioner, how you think is how you perceive the world, basically. So even though, we've all had the experience, I'm sure, of going to a party or going to an event and then later on asking everyone what happened, and no one says the same thing, because everyone, even if they're at the same place in the same time, apparently witnessing the same thing, there's a part of your brain that holds your thoughts and stories and filters and whatever, and it all runs through there before you get like, this is what happened. And so that's how powerful your thoughts are, that they shape your perception of the world and what you see or don't see. In fact, there's a story of like when the British arrived on an island, and I'm not going to remember which one right now. This is very old, when they were first colonizing the world, and they arrived in their big ships, and the people of the island, who had never seen ships before or white people or any of that, actually when they looked out to the sea, they didn't see the ships. They just didn't see them. This is recorded. And they didn't see them until the men got in their rowboats and rowed from their ships and got out onto the beach. And of course, they're a human being, so the people saw them and recognized them. But before that, they didn't see them. So that is, so how powerful, like what that filter is that we see what we think we're going to see, basically. And then when you put words to it, that's an extra dimension of frequency. It's now, it can be heard. It's like a thought with sound and the words that you speak. So start paying attention to, what is it that
Mm,
you're saying? Is there certain things, have clients that just say, I can't, all the time. It's like, well, you won't be able to then. If you keep saying, I can't do this, or that's hard, or phrase things a certain way, that will be what happens for you.
mm.
And that's why they call it spelling. Wasn't that fun to work
Yeah,
out?
spelling, the spelling
So,
spell.
yeah, one of the big invitations of this, or of this podcast of omens, oracles, and obvi-ism is to listen to what you're thinking and saying. Listen
Mm,
to what you're thinking and saying, and really be the witness of that, that higher perspective witnessing on your human self. We've all got this higher perspective of witness, and pay attention, because that will be what you create. Your thoughts are the perception, your words are, the action of that. And so they are superbly creative. And yeah, thanks for mentioning that, Evonne, because that
mm,
is super important to pay attention to. And we're all, I don't like the word guilty, but we are all guilty of saying things that we don't want to be true.
mm. Yeah,
So
that's
that's a very good thing to pay attention to. Your words are spells.
And along with that, it's like that knowing what's above us, below us, within us, without, that we're, everything is connected.
Mhm.
Everything is connected. So those words, even the thought patterns and our muscle movements and the air that moves out of our mouth through, what we speak, that all connects into the field of consciousness. And then going back to what Natasha said, it's like, what are we saying to ourselves? What are we hearing, and what are we regurgitating back out into the world? Like, is that what you really want to see happen in your life? Is that what we really want to see happen in the world? And it's not to say to shut off the things that, give us grief and pain, that we need to experiencing that. But what's the antidote? What's the spell that we're creating to acknowledge that, yes, but also to create a better world for ourselves and everything really. And
Yeah.
so at these points in the wheel, like the new moon and winter solstice, like these are portals that provide us access to create something better by making intentions and being very mindful of what we're putting out into the world.
Mindful, careful, and intentional. There you go.
Write that down. We'll come back to that. Mindful. Hang on, let me write it
Mindful
down.
and intentional.
Mindful, intention, and what was the other one?
Careful. So careful,
Careful,
mindful,
intention,
intentional.
intentional. There you go.
Your words and your thoughts. And yeah, like, you might be surprised. And it's also good if you've got a friend or someone you live with or someone you spend a bit of time with, get them on board with doing this with you so that they can also witness your words. Because the things that we've said so much, we often, it's like that same thing as if you live with a smell, even if it's not very nice, there'll be a certain point in time where you stop noticing that smell.
Mm.
And it's the same with these thoughts and words, where you might, they might have been not even yours. Often they're not. They've
Mm.
originated from, your family or your school or the culture you're in, and you don't even realize that you're saying it and having it. So it's great to have a little accountability buddy
I was
to
thinking that.
help to help each other listen, to pay attention, because you might not hear them because it's like the smell. You don't smell it anymore. It's always worrying to me.
Which leads on to our very first topic of our podcast, of Healing and Magical Arts podcast, is this episode 1 on omens, oracles, and Obvi-ism, listening to the call to action. And I think that we've just demonstrated well. I just want to come back to a definition that has been passed on to us through the Praxis program for the School of Shamanic Womancraft through Jane Hardwick-Collins. And one of the things that is mentioned in this program is listening is a vehicle through which we can be of service. Therefore, the depth and quality of listening equates to the depth and quality of how we show up.
So I just want to just underline that. Just listen to that again.
Mm.
And the quality that you are able to listen equates to the depth and the quality of how you show up to wherever, even if it's just for yourself.
Mm.
So it's
Yes.
really significant that.
So how we listen really can facilitate a really deep healing and transformational process. So when we develop the skill of listening, really listening from that place, and it's like it feels like the very first place that we start is listening. And how do we do that? And so the practice program goes on to speak of a few different types of listening. So that's self-listening. So, for example, listening to your own thoughts and just your own experience in the world. There's focus listening where you're tuning into something else
Or someone else.
or someone else that's other than yourself. And then there's the global listening, which we're going to focus on here in this space, which is listening with this broad scope of yourself and the world around you and other people, whether it be not just listening to people, but whether it be, the oracles that you meet, just listening to someone on the radio or a song that comes up, and also that self-listening of what feelings or reactions is that provoking you. So that real global listening, that you're not just an observer, but you're also a participant in this listening process.
So I just want to say, just notice the layers and levels that they build on each other. So the first one Evonne mentioned is self-listening, which is the inner realm. And it might be thoughts, feelings, it could be body sensations, it could be anything that's arising within. And then the next one is listening to someone or something. And then the global listening is kind of all of that and, maybe beyond what's in your immediate environment. And that includes, listening to the wind, so we've had speaking of omens and reading signs. You might be outside and you like have a thought, or you're speaking to a friend or someone and you have something, you're speaking a topic, and suddenly the wind changes. And Evonne and I have had this many times, and all of a sudden it's no wind, and all of a sudden all the trees are, and you just, wow, like what was just happening? And it's like a real response. Or there might be a bird that comes, or there could be, you could even, if your strong sense, we haven't talked about access senses yet, Evonne, that might be next. If your strong sense is through your nose, you might suddenly smell something. So it doesn't have to be a sound or a feeling or a vision. It could be a smell. So all the signs, or it could be something on the radio, or it could be, we were driving along the other day, and a car went past, and what did it say, Evonne? It was like, no problems, just solutions, something like that. I'm going to get those words wrong because I've just got the solutions part. And that was a sign. And it was like, oh, that's a good remembering of like, look, there's no real problems. There's just solutions. There's no mistakes. There's just new ways of doing things, right? Which I love.
I
So
love
yes, I
that.
just wanted to really highlight this expanse of that global listening.
Mm.
But it doesn't really work if you can't do the inner listening, because then you might get lost in all of that listening.
Mm. And this is why our next podcast will be on Know Thyself, because that follows on from this. And so if we are aware of our own internal dialogue or what's happening, but also transfer that to be able to intake information and outtake information, and getting ourselves out of our own way to really drop into the signs and omens and the oracles that are around us, we can really come into this place of seeing the patterns that are unfolding. For example, that example that we spoke about when we were traveling in the car and there was a big truck that went past and said, no problems, only solutions. It's like, oh, that caught our attention. So it's like, right, that's something. And funny enough, I was listening to a podcast yesterday. It was Pam Gregory, and she said exactly the same thing. There's only solutions here. And it was like, oh my God. So when you see repeating patterns to the things that you're seeing and listening and smelling or whatever, that's a clue to go, oh, there's something here that's calling my attention. So there might be repeating pieces of the puzzle that are presenting themselves to you, that are sort of trying to get your attention to steer you into a place of taking action as to what needs to happen next. And so the more that we can allow ourselves to drop into this more global listening, it can make a really uh, good foundations for which way we are being asked to go in that calling to action. So it's really, really interesting. Along with this comes with a trusting this. And so the more that we work in ourselves and do this deep inner work of healing and knowing our triggers and knowing our woundings and all of that stuff, we develop this layer of trust when we are listening and taking actions on the signs more and more. So it's that place that we get to that, oh, we can trust this. But it can take work to get to that point. So this is really just a really foundational level of what needs to happen when you begin a journey, is to listening to that call to action. And what we're saying, that it can show up in so many forms, that it's that coming back to that global listening to help us to see the signs to which way we need to go to next.
Yeah, I love that mention that of the when the things show up multiple times, because that happens a lot. And it really, and if something, a thread happen, we call them threads, right? If a thread happens like that, it is really trying to get your attention. So pay attention. Thinking of that beginning of journeys, it makes me think of, those times, and I'm sure everyone's had them. You're about to leave the house, right? To go off to do whatever. And you just suddenly have that thought. I'm going to use this example. You suddenly think of the umbrella. You're like, well, I don't need an umbrella, I don't need an umbrella. But where did that thought come from? So off you trot out to the world, and of course, you need the umbrella. That's a very benign example, but oftentimes we get the message, how many times I've spoken to my friends, or I've had the experience myself, or spoken to clients. And when I say, well, hang on, what happened at the beginning? And the signs were always there, and this is what our teacher Jane calls Obvi-ism, like if it feels confusing, it probably is confusing. If it doesn't make sense, well, that probably doesn't make sense. And so, starting to pay attention to what random thoughts or random signs on cars or trucks or random things that happen. I had a beautiful client say that, talking about that random stuff that happened and how good it was. And it's like, well, how random is it? It seems random, and maybe that's what makes it more intentional, actually, because it's not constructed by you. It's actually just popped into your field to get your attention. Yeah, so following the signs and, again, starting to witness what are those for you and how do they come to you? Because we're all different, we all have different ways of signs, like mine are, a lot of my signs are from nature. But like we have a dear friend, and when she's driving around the world, she gets lots of signs from actual signs. And but they're not telling what they're telling, there's like an underlying message
Mm.
to that. It's not about the truck. We don't even know what business that was. I can't remember. Irrelevant to us. We're not interested in that. But the message was clear.
Mm.
And it's just about paying attention. And I just want to speak to that as well of like, when I'm walking around in the world, and especially when I go walking out in nature, I see people and they're all got their ear pods and their phones, and they're talking on the phone, and they're on the phone, and they're listening to the phone. And I don't think they notice anything else, So think about, what are you plugging into,
Mm.
and there's a time and a place for listening and watching things that we have through the tech, obviously, as here we are on a podcast, right? However, you might be, if you're always plugged into the tech, then you might be not plugged into
Mm.
like the world around you, or even your own inner self. Are we always listening to someone else?
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because along with this, it calls for us to also look at the things that we're trying to distract ourselves with.
Hmm.
It wasn't that long ago that, I'd be watching television every night. You know, really, it wasn't. And when realized what was happening for me, and that was distracting me from doing other things. I mean, I did have 4 kids after that, but I think life got really busy. But now, that there is actual space for me to go down and go back to that place where, my attention was on, the box or whatever being programmed, that I can see now how detached I was from actually even being able to read the signs or to even know that it was a thing. And so I think the invitation here is to just watch these ways that we can distract ourselves. And sometimes that's a really good tool because, we all need a break from life, and sometimes that's necessary. But notice how much, and how much that is taken away from, what's being called for you, or the signs that are around you to do something else that is maybe more nourishing for you and for the world and others around you.
And just on that note, I wanted to add, like, we've all got our things, and not everyone's things are the same. Like
Mm.
it could be distractions with shopping, like the online shopping thing now is like the world's greatest distraction, along with TikTok and YouTube's and whatever. But it also could be eating, or um I mean, actual shopping or whatever. There's lots and lots of ways we can distract ourselves. And I think if you can notice what your things are, and it's not that any of these things are wrong. Like there's
Mm.
nothing wrong with all the things. It's just when we're using them to avoid something.
Mm.
And usually it's because we don't want to feel something, or we don't want to acknowledge something. And the problem is that if that thing, that feeling, that whatever it is, keeps being pushed down and not acknowledged, it's never going anywhere.
Mm.
And even though you might not be conscious of it, it is still rumbling around inside you, and actually, you know, directing your actions and energy unconsciously, which means you can't do anything about it. And so maybe, next time you think, oh, I just want to, get home from work and have a glass of wine and turn the TV on, or scroll on my phone, or just, shut it all out, just see if you can take pause to inquire to yourself, to do a bit of listening first. Not that you can't have the glass. I mean, well, we like a glass of wine. There's nothing wrong with that. People have been doing that for a long time. However, if we're doing it to distract ourselves, then we're missing something important, and it might be the clue, the key to what you want to create in life that's not working. And
Mm.
so maybe you can just pause and just do a little bit of listening and inquire, what is it that I don't want? What is it that wants to come through? What is it that I need to pay attention to? Because then at least you have a starting point for,
Mm.
okay, I have an uncomfortable feeling, or I'm having an uncomfortable thought. And at least then now, what is it? The first step is acknowledging the thing, right? And then at least it's out in the open, give it some air, and then maybe you can, begin to choose what you want to do with it. Just then you can go back to the thing if you want, or maybe you don't want to anymore.
Mm. Yeah, I like that. I like that.
Global listening on it as
Yeah,
well.
that yeah, taking
Miss
that moment to
yourself,
just drop in and
take it
listen.
bigger. Yeah.
Yeah. Even if it's for, 10 seconds or, it's just like that moment where you can just go, oh, I'm noticing I'm doing that thing again. Maybe if I just stop for a moment and just check in, to the signs and, what's happening around us and ourselves just for like a moment.
Mm.
Maybe you'll make a different decision or maybe not, and that's fine. But just giving yourself that permission to just slow everything down. We live and we're encouraged to live by our culture and our Western culture here to be so fast paced. And I think with, you know, Uranus, a planet of change, is going into Gemini, which is this, Gemini is a fast paced, moving air element. So that's going to become more and more in our face as technology speeds up, and it's already there. How easily we can get caught on that fast track train that we tell ourselves there's no time to stop and to listen. Um,
The
but
busy
really,
things. That's the other one, being busy.
being busy,
Some
yeah.
people just never stop. It's like actually that can be the distraction in itself,
Mm,
being busy.
being
It almost
busy.
feels like a competition sometimes of who's the busiest person and they get the gold stars. Like, but what are they doing?
Yeah. So it's interesting that listening and slowing down and just taking it really feels like this, allowing the void to come in, because we can all be, caught up in that midday high summer, go, go, go parenting, even if you're not a parent, but that energy of on and going all the time, which is what our patriarchal culture, Western culture wants us to do because it's so focused on production that to take a moment just to stop and still and listen with our ears of our hearts, another Jane quote, but that global listening to ourselves and outside, just taking a moment to pause and to allow that void space just to come in, even if it's just like 10 seconds. It could be enough to change a lifelong habit that has disconnected yourself from listening. So that listening and allowing yourself to be guided by, something far greater than you, can really make a huge change in your life and that of those around you. And we speak from this experience. This is something that Natasha and I and those in our community have worked on, is making that change from busy, 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 go, 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 caught up in our culture, and
Hamster
then
wheel.
yeah, the fast paced productive, what capitalism will,
Mm.
um and this point of coming back and listening, has, I don't know, for me it's completely changed my whole life, and for the better, and to allow the oracles and the omens and being guided and listening to the obvious signs, which were probably always in my face, but because I was so caught up on the capitalism wheel that I didn't listen to that. I wasn't tuning into that. So, which, created, and I'm not saying that my life up until this point was bad. It was great. But also now looking back on that time, now taking that time to allow the void, to allow the listening, and to allow something far greater than me, help guide me, has brought such a deep richness to my life and that of my family and the world around me. Like, my perspective in this life has changed, which I feel will probably change. It's a shift through the generations. Like, it's a generational shift that I've taught my kids to listen, to look at what's happening in the world around them in terms of the seasons and the stars, and and coming back and to help them remember actually them soul selves in something far greater than them. Yeah.
In fact, maybe it would be a good little practice to not only try and catch yourself. I mean, that was a talk of like
Mm,
catching yourself when you're about to numb yourself out, or shut yourself down or tune out. But, you might start yourself a little daily practice of just taking that moment before you start the day, before you start interacting with the world, just to tune into yourself before you begin,
mm,
so that you know where you are before you start engaging with the world, because it's a lot out there. Before you turn your phone on, before you do whatever, just, a couple of minutes and 3 deep breaths. 3 deep breaths can be a powerful tool.
mm,
3 deep breaths and just taking a moment to go, right, where am I? Who am I? Where am I at today? Just in myself before I engage. And it's
mm,
like it's being responsible for yourself,
mm,
not only to yourself, but also to who you're going to go and interact with, or the world you're going to interact with. Because, I know myself, I'm speaking of past selves. I used to rush around everywhere. I didn't know where I was at, and I was all over the shop, and I was very loud about it. And it's not only that did that impact me and my experience of life, but also those around me. Like I look back and I think, oh, like trusting in the perfection of everything. But also, I really am pleased that I'm not doing that anymore. I feel really grateful that that is not how I get around anymore. And I'm sure I have my moments like we all do.
mm,
But overall, yeah, that has been a vast improvement. And I wanted to suggest that as we're in this void space,
mm,
this deepening of letting go, this, as Evonne mentioned before, this time of year, if you do take a moment to sit with yourself and there's something arising and you think, oh, well, I don't know, I've sat, I've listened, and there's something arising, what am I supposed to do with that? Something really simple you can do is actually ritualize it.
mm,
So, if there's a feeling or a thought or a discomfort or whatever that arises when you take a moment, is you can share that with something. So you like something outside, like a rock or a leaf or a stick or a crystal or something, and you can allow that item to represent that thing. And you might choose to let it go. So it could go to the ground, it could go in the fire, it could go to the ocean, or you might want to look after it. It might need tending. So you might put it in a little box with a little bit of material and go, I'll just look after it there until I know what I want to do with it. Does that make sense? So kind of like creating a ritual, and so it's not forgotten. It's not pushed back down, because we get a bit nervous and you're like, oh, I don't know what to do with that. And I've got to go, and I've got kids, and I've got things to do. But just to take a moment. And the other thing our teachers taught us was to put it to the side. Now, the main thing is when something arises, if you put it to the side or you put it into a something and you go, I'm going to look after that later, or I'm going to do something with it later, don't forget. Take a, if you do something like that, remember to tend to it later, whatever it is, and trust that you will remember in the right timing. But yeah, I was just thinking as we were talking about it, like, yeah, that can feel really challenging to have something arise and not know what to do with it. And maybe, if you're listening to yourself, you might need to talk to someone about it. You might need to run it out. You might need to meditate on it. We all have our different ways. You might need to have a shower and wash it away. So there's so many different ways and tools that you can use to move that energy. Sometimes it's just the breath is enough, like you don't even need to know all the details about it. The mind will tell you, oh, you need to understand all of it. You actually don't always need to understand. If it's arising, it's arising. So breathe it out, let it go into something, send it to the water, the fire, the earth, and whatever you use to help you. So if it's an element or an earthly thing, always say thank you.
mm,
That when we thank the elements, whether it's the wind or the fire or the earth or whatever it is, or the water, or we thank the item we've used, then we're actually saying it's done.
mm,
And we're being in reciprocity, because, that's one thing we haven't been that good at as human beings for a little while now, is reciprocity with the earth. And it has not been, we've not been in right relationship with the earth, So one way we can rectify that is whenever we have a moment with her, that we say thank you.
mm. And I
And
think
what
also, sorry.
go on, that's it.
I was going to say, and also within that, thanking the past versions of yourself or your ancestors or your parents or whoever, because we're all just going on what we know. And, you know, you might look back on your past self and cringe. It's like, oh, or, or a parent, or, oh, to know that we're always doing the best that we can. And, it's leading us to something else. So, really thank that past version of yourself, that whatever that disconnect was happening in. Thank you. Now you're aware of it, and to go from that place. So, that feeling of shame and things like that can be dispelled when we really see ourselves and really thank our past versions for bringing us to this place, because we are always growing and always expanding and always learning, and to know that.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Yvonne. And so often, especially when we're on this journey of, wanting to improve ourselves and grow and come, as Yvonne often says, to our next place of wholeness, you know, the worst thing that I think we can do, worse than anything else, is actually to be really mean to ourselves when we don't get it right. Like, that comes back to the thing, no problems, just solutions, right? So that version of you that was the problem, or that moment where you did the wrong thing, actually it was just your path to the solution. It's just your path to the next thing. And so no matter what, even if you set yourself the task of every morning, I'm going to listen to myself before I go out into the world, and you forget for a day or 2 days or a week, don't be mean to yourself about it. That is literally the worst thing you can do. And if you do have children, or if you've had pets, you've probably worked that out, that when they do something wrong or they make a mistake, being mean to them about it does not make it improve. It's the worst thing that can happen, going into shame. And shame is like, you don't want to add any more of that into the world. So whether it's to yourself or other, be kind about it. It's
Kindness and loving.
such a sweet note, kindness.
It's
All had kindness from someone when we didn't expect it, and it just makes you want to cry with all sorts of joy and things, because it's so magical, that kindness.
mm,
So yeah, be kind in the world to yourself and others always, even if they're doing something, I say wrong because there's not really any wrong. So yeah, something wrong. um yeah.
mm. So, this brings us to the end of our very first episode of the School of Healing and Magical Arts podcast. You've been listening to episode 1, Omens, Oracles, and Obvi-ism, listening to the calls of action. We've covered a lot of points, from introducing cycles to the maps, the Earth cycle, the astro cycle. We introduced guides. We've looked at listening and the different types of listening, knowing thyself. What else did we cover? Lots of things.
Lots and lots of things.
Lots of
So we
things.
hope and we trust that whatever, just trust that whatever you've absorbed is what you need to absorb. And if this feels like a lot of information, you don't have to remember it all. Just trust that you and your body have absorbed exactly what you need to absorb, and perhaps awoken some old wisdom that you already had. If you found yourself saying, "Oh yeah, I know that," great. That is
See it as
excellent.
a see this as a sign as you're
Fine.
on the
See
on
it
this
as
path.
fine. And sometimes we talk about it as resonance. So what's resonated with you,
Mm,
and start to notice, what is that, how does that be in you? Like, how does something resonate? How did you get here? How did you know to listen? Start to pay attention, because the more you refine your listening to yourself and your intuition, higher self, body wisdom, whatever you want to call it. There's many versions of that. We'll maybe talk about that another time. But yeah, get to know what that is, because we're not all the same. We have our
mm,
own little ways.
So
So
if
thank you
you
so much. Mhm.
So the invitation is, if you have experienced, multiple signs showing up and it's led you to a particular outcome, or if you've got a story about, a birthing intention that you've seen come to fruition, anything that we have spoken about today on this podcast that you've got a story about, we would love to hear your story. Please share
Mm,
in the comments.
mm,
If you're resonating with this and you think, yep, we'd love for you to like give this a bit of a thumbs up and to share it amongst your friends. The more that we can spread this magic and this information out there, it is our belief that we are creating a a more loving and lighter world to be in, not just for ourselves, but for the generations to come.
Mm.
Yes. So you can reach us at our, both of us have Instagram. So you can find me at Evonne Wildheart on Instagram.
I am Seek Balance on Instagram.
We'll put all these in our show notes so you can see them. But also, we have developed a Patreon, which we are very excited to launch. Several tiers of memberships where you can connect with us. But overall, thank you for listening. It has been a deep honor to share our wisdom of what we've gained through our teachers and our remembering with you. And hopefully, we would invite you to tune in to our next podcast on episode 2, Know Thyself.
And just to know that if you join the Patreon, you will be the first to know when we release each and every podcast. And we look forward to our growth in this space. So watch this space, I guess.
Thank you. Love you all. Thank
Love
you
you
for
all.
listening. Take care. Bye.
Signs.